It's the anti-checker.
We will return to your scheduled programming shortly, or we are currently experiencing technical difficulty.
Good morning, everybody. Michael J. Crawford, the anti-checker here, and good to see you all. A little bit before I started, I saw DJ and BIRDOPREY were both on. DJ said first, BIRDOPREY said, sure, DJ, and then DJ said, I am. But then once I got started, Azine was actually first, saying hello, Darth Raven Thirst. Okay. Dan says hello. Hector says good morning. Resolute says hi. Joseph identifies as first. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about identity politics, I think. Darth Raven says, how's the pain? The pain is almost to the point where it's tolerable. So I'm happy about that. It's definitely less than it was, but it still hurts. John says good morning. 47 Yorktown says good morning. Mrs. Anti-Checker is wishing me luck and having a good show. Thank you, my dear. Hector says cute sharks. I love those. Those are sharks at the aquarium in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Wonderful aquarium. Owned by the Ripley Corporation. Same people as Ripley's, believe it or not. Chris Cook said hello. Just glad to be here. I'm glad you are here. And Sci-Fi says nope, definitely not first, and damn proud of it. Well, I don't know why you'd be proud of it, but at least you recognize who you are. BIRDOPREY says kapla. Carlos says liked. Thank you, sir. Darren says how's it going? Apes, for some reason. Joseph saying hail to the queen. Sharks are the evidence cleaners of Karoga. That I would believe. And so Darth says, sounds good. It's heading the right way. Yes. My biggest concern right now with the leg is just that I still can't lift my leg. Like if I'm lying flat on my back and I'm doing like, my legs instead of my arms here and I lift this leg, okay, fine. I try to lift the leg with the surgery, it won't move at all. Still, that's a problem. And I'm working with the physical therapist, but, hopefully we'll get that resolved relatively quickly. That noise over there is going to drive me crazy. I'm going to have to oh well, can't do anything about it right now. Anyway, Sci-Fi Nation says, Anchecker's on, trying to crack a cold one, continue with housework while listening in and interjecting when needed. All right, my friend. Well, I don't know what kind of cold one you're going to crack at this hour, but enjoy whatever you are cracking. Dan says here, Darren says, Anchecker, speaking of Ripley's Believe It or Not, the theme to the Jack Palance show is one of my faves. Oh, yeah, I remember the old Jack Palance show, yes. All right, so one thing, it's funny because, I always have the church service playing behind me, and I actually paused it. This is the live stream of today's service, but I paused it just to because I thought it was funny. If you notice, the person giving the announcements today is the but wait guy, my good friend Andrew. So I just thought that was funny, and I would show that to you guys. So now that you saw that he's the one up there, I'll get back to it. Haberjam UK says, good morning, brother. I can't think of a better way to recover from a colonoscopy than watching your live stream. Wow, my friend, if you just had a colonoscopy, I'm truly sorry. I've done that recently, too, and that sucks. Resolute says, lifting your leg may take about a month or so. Well, it's been almost a month, and the physical therapist is actually a little concerned that I should be able to lift my leg better than I can right now. So that's, Darren says that doesn't look like Andy. Well, he got a haircut, actually. That's why, if anything, and usually he wears a hat, because, he was starting to go bald, and he wore a hat to kind of hide it a little bit, and then he just said, you know what, screw it, and he shaved his head. And so that's why he looks different. And he also trimmed up his beard. And let's see. Sci-Fi says, I'm allowed to early my only day off, and I've been up for 4 hours already. Hey, I'm not judging. If whatever you drink is fine. I just, for me, like you guys know, I'm not really like, I don't drink beer or wine much. I'm more of a spirits kind of guy, vodka, whiskey, that kind of thing. But drinking early in the morning I could never do. I don't know why. It's not like I think that there's some taboo against it. I just don't like it. I did a call into DJ stream yesterday. Oh, very cool. Didn't catch that. Yesterday, I will tell you, yesterday was a rough day for me. I did not. I could not. I couldn't sleep at all Friday night. After the Nerdrotic stream, I tried to get to sleep, and my leg was just driving me crazy, and I could not sleep for the life of me. And so Saturday, I spent most of the day just trying to sleep a little bit, and I couldn't sleep for more than an hour or two at a time. I never once sat at this computer yesterday, and that's kind of, it was just, yeah, I was completely out of it all day. Hector says, you look and sound like you need more pain medication or more than a cup of coffee. Well, I'm trying to conserve the pain medication because I only have enough to last me a few more days, and I don't know if the doctor's going to let me have another refill. So I'm trying not to take the pain medication unless I absolutely have to. Azine says, Spirits Guy, I guess your shirt speaks the truth. Well, this is actually a concert shirt from the Depeche Mode Spirit Tour, but yeah, that's yes. Let's see. Antitrigger, the Italians are just the Irish if they discovered wine instead of whiskey. You're probably right. BIRDOPREY wants to know, did you get a Nerdrotic bump? If you mean as far as subs, yes. Got a decent little chunk of subs, probably about 75 to 100 subs from being on the Nerdrotic stream, which was cool. But really, I just enjoyed hanging out with him. Yeah, Nerdrotic is a great guy, and also the opportunity to hang out with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers at the same time. I've never had a chance to interact directly with Jeremy, and that was fun too. And I gotta say that considering the only even semi interaction that I had with Jeremy was my criticizing him and him basically retorting that I'm a nobody. And so everybody thought there was this feud between us when that was basically the extent of it. And he's a good guy. We had a fun time, and we actually, if you watch the stream at all, we kind of poked fun at each other a little bit, and it was fun. Azine says, just notice you're over 9,000. Yes, I did break the 9,000 thanks to Nerdrotic, and so which is nice. Getting close to that 10,000 mark. So then I get to, the funny thing is, I'm going to reveal why my name is the Anti-Trigger, and everybody's going to say, well, that was anticlimactic. That's ultimately what it's going to come down to. But I am going to have to start getting that video together because, yeah, we're getting dangerously close now. All right, so Aberjam says, did Jesus have all his godly powers during his 33 years as a man, or did he have the same limitations as the rest of us? That is an excellent question. And the problem is, Aberjam, is that there's very, very little documentation of Jesus's life prior to his baptism with John the Baptist. From my understanding of it, did he have all of his godly powers? Probably. And it's not really so much like you think of it as superpowers or something like that, but it's really more or less the way that it's kind of described is that he had the authority to use, godly abilities, as do people to a certain extent. And that's where like gifts of the Spirit and stuff come in and that kind of thing. But did he have that from the beginning? I don't know if he had it from birth or if he had it from, say, the time that he reached the age of like what is it like for Jews, like 12 or 13 when you have when you become an adult. But wherever it was, it does seem like he was at least very knowledgeable prior to his baptism based on what you see in the Bible. Let's see. Gary says, tell your doctor to make a script for chronic pain and then it can be filled for longer. Well, it doesn't work that way, though, because here in Tennessee, they are extremely paranoid about prescribing any kind of opioid medicine. And so the pain meds that actually work on this kind of thing are, they are narcotics, and therefore they are very, very sketchy about giving prescriptions out. They will give you, like what they've done, and he'll give you a 10-day supply, and I've gotten 3 prescriptions from him now, so that will take it to 30 days, and then after that, I don't know what'll happen. So I don't know if he's going to give me another 10 days or not, but that's up to him. Let's see. Antrager's not, let's see. Antrager, it's not going to be worth it, I'll bet, because you don't like the name Trekker as you call yourself a Trekkie. I'm not going to comment as to what it is until I actually get there. You are a Trekkie, not a Trekker. I'm not going to get into that. Sci-Fi Nation, although I will say I'm a Trekkie, but that's not the reason I'm the anti-Trekker. Sci-Fi Nation's 9.04 subs. Congratulations. Thank you, my friend. And Dwayne Morris, thank you. Sorry, I called you Darwin for some reason. Said, I subbed you because of Nerdotic. Well, awesome, Dwayne. Welcome, my friend. And, anybody that did join because of Nerdotic, welcome if you're here now. If you're not here now, well, you can't hear me say welcome. And Gary says same in Missouri. Okay, it's some states are more, shall we say, liberal about it than others. I think it's silly if you're going to, the problem with prescription medication, like oxycodone and those kind of things, is that the doctors need to just prescribe them when they're necessary and not prescribe them when they're not necessary. How about we just do that rather than they try to make it like the drug company's fault that doctors are overly prescribing it, and people say, well, the drug companies try to get the doctors to prescribe. Of course they do. That's their product. But it's still ultimately up to the doctor to determine what is best for the patient in terms of medication and stuff. The drug companies are going to sell their products and try to say how awesome their particular products are, but the doctors are not obligated to prescribe what the drug companies are selling. Hector wants to know, when I run out of meds, will I become the Joker? No. At least I certainly hope not. And let's see. Antrigger, I sub to you because I want Auntie. Auntie will be back as soon as my leg is healed up enough so that she can be up here with me and I don't have to panic about her jumping up on my leg, which may be a little while, but I do miss having her up here with me. And BIRDOPREY says, welcome. Sunday streams are different than the rest of the week. That's true. Sunday streams, we talk a little bit more about religion and politics and that kind of stuff than we do on the regular streams. Regular streams, I try to focus in on pretty much nerdy stuff. The kind of stuff we talked about on the Nerdotic stream, or, as far as, Star Wars, Star Trek, that kind of stuff. On the Sunday morning streams, I open it up to the deeper issues, and that's what I wanted to talk, and this kind of goes back to what's been going on in the nerdosphere as well, but something we've been talking about actually at our church quite a bit as of late, and that is the whole idea of identity politics. How do you derive your identity, and by extension, how do you ascertain your self-worth? And that's the problem with identity politics. These people that are pushing identity politics into things like Star Trek, Star Wars, and other nerd franchises. The reason they're doing that is because they can only find their own self-worth in that faction of their identity, be it being a feminist, being their sexual identity, their ethnic identity. They think that that is what determines their value as a human being. And that is a genuine problem, because they're not the only ones that do this. The SJW crowd are notorious for doing this, but they're not the only ones that do it. We tend to derive our identity and our self-worth out of superficial things, not just things like what I just mentioned, sexual identity or gender or race, but we derive our self-worth out of things like how much money do we make? and her job, right? Do you like Star Trek or Star Wars? Some people will actually derive their identity. Some people consider themselves a cut. And I've seen this. I know it sounds cruel, but because you guys know I'm a Star Trek fan first. I love Star Trek and Star Wars, but Star Trek has always been my first love when it comes to the nerd stuff. And there are people that genuinely think that because they are a Star Trek fan, that they are better than other nerds who are Star Wars fans, because they'll say that Star Trek is deep and philosophical and Star Wars is light and superficial, and therefore they're a better person than the fan of the other franchise. This is rampant, not in our society. When I say our society, I know there are people from all over the world in this stream. It is rampant everywhere right now. We find our identity in superficial, unimportant things. And we all need to take a look back at our lives and say, am I identifying myself based on something that is truly, ultimately unimportant? Now, here's where the problem comes in from a philosophical or theological line. If you are an atheist, and I know that I have a significant number of atheists that watch my channel and a lot of them I consider friends, and I don't have a problem with people just because they're an atheist. I don't think that they're less of a person or anything, but the problem becomes that if you're an atheist, it becomes much more difficult to find your value and worth in something other than something purely superficial. Why? Because there isn't anything other than the purely superficial. I mean, if you don't believe that there is a soul, or you don't believe that there's any kind of higher power that you submit to that sets the ultimate standard or anything like that, then no, there's nothing other than the superficial. And so, yes, the person who dies with the most toys wins, basically. And so if I were still an atheist, I would probably be considering my worth based on my success as far as pulling in a good income, taking care of my family, stuff like that, which are all good things, but not ultimately anything more than a superficial trait. Anyway, that's kind of something that I was, we've been talking about a little bit at our church, and I think that it rings true. I know. So, anyway, back to the comments for a few minutes here. Hector wants to know if Sassy is rested. Darth Reverend says, Enter, you skipped my last comment, you heathen. Do you think Jesus was scared to die as he took in so many sins? Yes, I absolutely do think well, I don't know if he was scared to die. I think he was scared of what was coming, though. I mean, if you look at the prayer in Gethsemane, that he was clearly apprehensive and did not want to be crucified. I don't think Jesus wanted what happened to him by any stretch, and he directly stated that just before the crucifixion when he prayed and asked the Father to pass this cup to another if it's possible, but yet your will be done. And that's another thing that teaches Christians about how to be properly submissive, that yes, it's okay to not want your life circumstance to be what it is, but ultimately you should want God's will in your life. BIRDOPREY says Sassy is well rested. I guess that's good. Gary says, Enter, the doctors prescribe it, but the state has set limits to it because of prescription abuse. But that's the problem. I don't think the state should be making medical decisions. That's what pisses me off about these types of political situations, is that the state is stepping in where it is not an expert. Most senators have law degrees. Most Congress people have legal, law degrees. They are not doctors. They are not pharmacists. They do not understand how to properly treat pain. And so for them to tell the doctors, oh no, you can't do that because, of some political thing, then you are causing suffering directly because of your ignorant political position. So, yeah. Darth says, I don't identify as anything. I'm just an Irish Catholic jerk. But you see, you that's a contradictory statement, Darth, because you identify as Irish and Catholic and being a jerk. People should be able to buy any medication anytime. I don't know if I would go quite that far, Bird. I do understand why narcotics are controlled substances. I don't think that people, because I'll tell you, oxycodone is one of the few pain meds that actually work for me because I have a fairly high tolerance to things like Tylenol and stuff does nothing. But and so I can understand if it were available over the counter, that some people would buy it and just pop those pills all day long, and especially and those types of pills can cause long-term damage if you abuse them. So I can understand why there are controls in place, but I think the controls need to be set by the medical professionals, not the politicians. Nightbreeze says, good morning, how you doing? Darren says, I just saw the Star Trek. The trouble with Edward, Star Trek isn't deep or smart anymore. Well, that much is true, but I'm talking about classic Trek there specifically, Darren. You know that. Carlos says, I believe the Bible is more a history book with morals in life and how to respect each other rather than a truth. Like the theory of cosmic consciousness is a bit like the Great Link. Well, the problem is, though, here's the thing, Carlo. If I understand that like there are bits and pieces. The Bible is an interesting collection of books. Because keep in mind, the Bible is not a single book. It's actually, like the Protestant Bible is a collection of 66 individual books that are then put into this volume that we call the Bible. And and some of them are purely historical texts. Some of them are poetic, like if you look at the Psalms and stuff like that, which Psalms is actually, they're songs. They're literally songs. Proverbs, a book of wisdom, and stuff. But then when you get into things like the Gospels are historical, but they describe events that many refuse to believe actually happened because of the supernatural element. So that's kind of, sorry, allergies are driving me crazy today. Gary says, Disney Star Wars is superficial. Absolutely. Well, that new trailer is the very definition of superficial. The new Star Wars trailer shows you some beautiful, beautiful visual effects and nothing about the story whatsoever, which is kind of a shame. Peter Quinn says, hey, Andrew, been a while. I'm watching the big match. Well, I have no idea who the big match is, but I hope that your team prevails if it's a team sport. If it's a one-on-one, I hope your person wins. Darth Aaron says, Andrew, said you have part of your colon, your knee removed. You're less of a person. Well, that's technically true. Peter says, how things say Trigger, but Star Trek fans are better. I just don't look down on people. I don't think Star Trek fans are better people inherently than Star Wars fans. I just think that they have, what you tend to find, like Star Wars is actually a moral tale more than anything. Star Trek is not. Star Wars is your classic good versus evil, your morality tale and that kind of thing. Star Trek is like a philosophical look at the human condition and what the potential for humanity is in the future. Two very, very different things, but I don't think that, and I think both are good. Andrew, do you like cartoons when it shows a spirit or soul traveling to heaven, and how do you think your soul or spirit actually travel from this world to the next one, if so? Interesting question, Dan. No, I don't like the cartoons do that, because that is completely inaccurate as far as from a theological standpoint. The way that the Bible describes it, and I just realized, because I think a couple of turds just dropped in the bucket, but I don't have the Streamlabs alert box on. So let me turn that on, because I think somebody may have just put, yeah, I got a super chat from Luke, my favorite Frenchman. And I thank you, Luke, says, congrats on the 9,000 and number 26. Thank you, Luke, and I'm glad I noticed that. And what was it? There was something I wanted to tell you, Luke, and now it's gonna be bugging me for the rest of this show. But let me play number 26, and then I'll get back to it.
The toast and eggs are really good, but there seems to be something missing. Yeah, that's what you're having for breakfast? That simply won't do. Follow me instead. What kind of place are you taking us to? A place that will introduce you to Frosted Fruity Hulls. Not only does it have 4 unique fruity flavors, but it also has a glazed frost that makes it extra yummy.
How do they get so deliciously frosty?
The frostiness of Frosted Fruity Hulls, of course, comes from this hull. part of a complete nutritious breakfast.
Frosted Fruity Holes, just the thing to have when you're getting ready for church on Sunday morning. Thank you, Luke. I truly appreciate the €2, and welcome back, my friend. Haven't seen you in a little while, and you have been missed. So back to what Dan was asking about, as far as cartoons showing the ghost rising out of a person. A lot of times they'll have like wings and strumming a harp as they fly up to heaven. Based on the biblical description, what happens when you die, wait for it, is you're dead. All right? Then, sometime in the future, after the last human has actually died, when mankind is extinct, then all humanity will, and as far as the divine process of doing this, don't ask me. I am not God. I can't answer exactly how he does this. But somehow God resurrects, meaning brings back to life every single person who ever lived. At that point, that's what people refer to as Judgment Day. And that is when people will either go to heaven or whatever the alternative is. And then then once that separation is made, the people in heaven are judged based on the fruits of their life and rewarded appropriately so. However, no, you do not simply float out of your corpse and go to heaven. That's completely silly and bad theology. And I don't know where that kind of thinking came from. T-Berg says, no matter what haters say, you're balanced and honest in thought and opinion. That's refreshing. Thank you, T-Berg. I truly appreciate that. I try to be, and here's the problem with that. That's why I'm not a particularly popular YouTuber. It's much easier to, if you go balls to the wall with an opinion or an agenda, it's much easier to gain subs. Because if I, like, let's say that I'm a hardcore conservative, right-winger, anti-SJW, rail on everything that J.J. Abrams does. I'll refer to J.J. Abrams as Jar Jar Abrams and crap like that, right? It's much easier to attract an audience doing that than to try and give a thoughtful, balanced commentary about what's going on. Because a thoughtful, balanced commentary isn't as exciting because I'm not always hating on people, and sometimes I end up defending people that I don't particularly care for, like J.J. Abrams, I have to admit, is a great director. He's not a very good writer, and he's not a particularly good storyteller. And so that's a problem when it comes to being successful on YouTube, but I take that compliment to heart, T-Berg. I truly do. Dan says, I like both Star Trek and Star Wars. I've liked both since the beginning, so yes. Peter says, I had a nasty neurovirus this weekend. Oh, that sucks, my friend. Hate getting sick. Hit the like button. Thank you, my friend. Sci-Fi Nation says, and Night Breeze donates $1. Thank you so much. What's your opinion on Judas actually being a holy man by turning in Christ? Oh, well, that's going to be an interest. I'll get to that in just a minute. Let me bring my dashboard up so that I can actually see the whole question again. Yes, with YouTube and anti-tracker. Sorry, the dashboard takes a minute to load. I meant to load it before I started the stream, but I forgot. All right, so what is your opinion on Judas actually being a holy man by turning in Christ? If he didn't do it, then the crucifixion wouldn't occur. Hence, Christ's sacrifice to save mankind does not happen. That is an interesting question. And actually, I think there's a couple of interesting thoughts behind it. One was, if you read the scripture itself, it suggests that Judas was in fact possessed by the devil. That is actually in the scripture, as far as like when it's mentioned that Jesus sat with Judas, who was the devil, or Judas who and that's That's kind of damning right there. It's difficult to argue that he was good if he was someone who, was truly possessed. That being said, the devil can only do what God allows him to do. And that's actually, you can go back to the book of Job for evidence of that. So do I think that Judas was a holy person thoughtfully doing what God's will was? Probably not. I think it's an interesting idea, but it would be very it would be very out of character for God to say, okay, so I want you to basically stab this guy in the back. But it would not be entirely out of character for God to say to the devil, all right, well, you know what? If you can try to get one of these guys to betray him if you can. And the devil was successful in one case, and God knew that the devil would be successful with that. Honestly, I think that had Judas not betrayed Christ, that he still would have been crucified, because the Pharisees and Sadducees were already after him. The only thing that Judas really did was tell them where he was at a specific time so that he could be arrested. He would have been caught sooner or later, and it would have happened sooner or later. It just there would not have been a betrayer in the narrative. Dan says, there's an episode of Big Bang Theory where Amy asks Penny, what's the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars? And Penny says there's no difference whatsoever. And I find it offensive because clearly there is a difference. Well, but you see, Dan, the thing is that Penny, at least, and I don't know how old that particular episode of the Big Bang Theory, but particularly in the earlier episodes of Big Bang Theory, Penny her character was intentionally ignorant of such things. So now I don't know the context of that conversation with her and Amy, but if she had the conversation in front of, say, Leonard or Sheldon would have had a heart attack over her saying that, and tried to set her straight. Or at least I would hope so. Dartherin says, Enter, my culture teaches you that submitting to another or bowing is a bad thing. Always look in the eye as nobody is above you. Well, that's an interesting idea, but I don't personally follow that philosophy. I think the Bible teaches us to submit to the authority that is above us because that authority was given its authority from above. Schromer says, good evening, or greetings, A-Checker fellow nerds. Just got the notification. Welcome, Schromer. Captain MKG's in the house, says good morning. Dan says, do you find a rainbow symbol being used by gay people offensive? I do. Because it was originally a Jewish symbol, and also by extension a Christian symbol, that God would not, of course, wipe out the world via flood a second time. It was a promise. And Peter is saying, Jo and Tune. No idea what you're doing there, Peter. Aberjam says, Christ emptied himself, empty Greek, and did all things by the Father. He often said, I can of mine own self do nothing. That's an example to follow. His power was restored upon death. Very nicely put, Aberjam. No, and no, you don't have to send me the verses for that, but I that sounds about right. But very nicely said. Dan says, do you find it offensive when someone refers to something in the Bible as magic or magician's work? Depends on what they're referring to, Dan. I do find it offensive when people purposefully use terminology to belittle Christianity as a whole by, like, for example, trying to think of something off the top of my head, but it's like invisible sky daddy, or you believe in fairy tales, or stuff like that. I do find that kind of terminology offensive. I try not to get worked up about it, but to me, it tells me the maturity level of the person that I'm talking to. Because if you have to stoop to those types of terms in order to make your point, then your point is pretty weak. Sci-Fi Nation says, Mary Jane, the all-natural painkiller guaranteed to work. The only side effects are increased appetite, dry mouth, and crazy, wild inventions and conversations. Well, unfortunately, that particular painkiller is not available where I live. Peter says, haven't seen the Star Wars teaser, Newcastle versus Wolves, and we just scored 1-0. Very good, I guess. Go whichever team scored, or whichever team you're rooting for. As far as the Star Wars teaser, you're not missing anything. I mean, well, there's some beautiful special effects. That's all you're missing. Dan says the Death Star records on a new moon we have not seen before. True, they said it is a new planet because why go back to Endor just because the Death Star was orbiting Endor and there's no way it could have escaped Endor's gravity. Whatever. It kicked off at 2. It's now 2:39. Gotcha. And you time traveled last night. Well, congratulations. Hope that went well for you. Now, Shomer says, many of the books of the Old Testament are written about historical events using parables to give meaning rather than scientific accuracy. It tells events in a way people can understand. That's actually an interesting idea there, Shomer, and I don't entirely disagree with you. I do think some of the stories of the Old Testament are parables, but that's just my own personal opinion. Keep in mind that there are... something we talk about at our church pretty regularly is major on the major, minor on the minors. There are things that are very, very important that are salvation dependent, right? If you look at the Bible as a whole. For example, you are the acknowledgement that Jesus died for your sins. That's a salvation issue. If you don't believe that, based on what the Bible says, you are not saved. So there's no room for debate as far as interpretation there. However, things like taking a literal interpretation of Genesis versus suggesting that, say, the Garden of Eden was a parable to kind of describe the general relationship between God and man and the earth, I think that that's perfectly reasonable. And your salvation is not dependent on whether or not you believe that Adam and Eve were literal people or an idea. Many of the, let's see, I already read that. East frosted fruity holes every day for breakfast. Absolutely. I thought you don't do Super Chats on the Sunday stream. It's been a while since I was here, so I'm probably misremembering. You might be misremembering. We just don't get, honestly, Darren, we just don't get a lot of Super Chats on the Sunday streams. I started out not doing the Super Chat rewards, but then I realized I'm going to be me. And we do silly things no matter what. So I don't have a problem with doing the Super Chats because this is not church as much as, I'm not Pastor Mike. I'm just Michael J. Crawford. We're just talking, and we're talking about churchy subjects on Sunday mornings. But if this were church, I would expect all of you to give me 10% of your income because this would be your church, right? Darth Renan says, my mom's cousin, when he was about to pass, he said, "Mommy, I see angels and Nanny and God, and it's so pretty." And his mom said, "Okay," and he passed on. And, that's the funny thing, because I think that there's, the problem with those kinds of, like, near-death experiences and actual death experiences, things that people claim to see while they're in the process of passing, you do have to question, what is it that they're actually seeing? Are they seeing something beyond this world, or are they simply, is their brain... because it's shutting down, showing them what they imagine that they're going to see. And I don't know the answer to that. Gary says, saying one group is better than another is divisive. We as a community should strive to be more inclusive, not the SJW version, but truly inclusive. Yes, I agree, Gary. And that's something that I fight for on my channel, and that's something that I believe in wholeheartedly, is that and one thing I'll tell you, this is the good thing about the SJW invasion of our franchises, is that if not for the SJWization of Star Trek and Star Wars fans would not have galvanized the way they have over the last couple of years and are on the same side of this now. A lot of Star Trek fans and Star Wars fans can now look at each other with common ground about these attacks against the franchises we love, because the attacks are extremely similar. Dan says, do you like Christmas crackers? Recently there's a shop selling me different novelty crackers, and one of them had religious things inside the cracker, like a pocket mini Bible. Never heard of them. Doesn't sound like, I don't see why it doesn't sound offensive or anything, but hey. T-Berg says Judgment Day is every day thanks to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Well, that's yeah. Mr. Lundell says, finally downloading my copy of Space Engineers, and lo and behold, I'm going to have to beef up the RAM before I can play it. Yeah, it does suck up some RAM. So, but don't worry, Mr. Lundell, we will be waiting for you. Aberjam says, hope you realize when I ask you a question and then answer it later, I'm not trying to bait you. I just want your opinion without affecting or preempting your answer. No worries, Aberjam. I don't have a problem with that. This is a conversation. Sorry, I'm moving around here. I need to get my leg elevated. It's starting to throb a little bit. And so I need to constantly be shifting my leg. It's a pain in the butt. All right. Well, actually, it's a pain in the leg. I don't believe that only believers go to heaven and church. As far as I'm concerned, it's a threat to go to church. Well, Peter, I'm basing it on simply what the Bible says, not on my own personal opinion. It does make it pretty clear that basically you have to accept that Christ is your Savior to get in. Now, does that mean you have to be a Christian per se? That you have to actually, go to church every Sunday and all that? Not necessarily, but I do think that it is a dangerous place to suggest if you are not ignorant of the church that you should not go. There's a difference between ignorance and hubris. It's ignorance if you've never, like, let's say you live in the outermost jungles of South America or something, and you've never heard of Christ or anything like that. Is it possible that this person can still get into heaven? I think it is. Because what Christ says is that the way, basically, the ultimate, what you need to do with your life is to, number one, love God. Number two, love your fellow man. You can do that even if you don't know all the terminology and stuff. So even though Christ says you have to go through me, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to know him by his proper name. And people that argue that you do have to know the name of Jesus, I will corner them every single time by simply saying, then why don't you speak his true name? Because his name is not Jesus, it is Yeshua. And so if you're calling him Jesus and you say you have to know his name to get into heaven, you're not even speaking his name correctly. All that being said, if you are well aware of the Christian message but you choose to ignore it and just say, I'm just going to be a spiritual person, now you're walking on very shaky ground. If that makes sense. According to the Bible, some souls, saints, are already conscious the transfiguration on Mount Tabor with Jesus, Peter, and James. Yes, there are exceptions, but in answering the question, Shermer, I was talking about in general. Do you find it offensive when the word novelty is used with something religious, like the shop is selling novelty stuff, but some of it being religious? Not necessarily. I mean, I know that novelty can mean different things to different people. I don't think that it necessarily means, I do have a problem, like if you put, I think that religion should be treated with respect overall. I don't think that, for example, if a bookstore puts the Bible in the fiction section, I might find that offensive. And I understand why some people might be hesitant to put it as nonfiction, so you put it in a religious section, which is what most bookstores do. John DeMarco says, I agree that you're balanced. When you were on Nerdrotic on Friday, I got the impression you were the most moderate, if that's the right term. Well, you know what? It's kind of funny because I don't know how I came across to a lot of people on the Nerdrotic show, but I did feel like... I enjoyed the fact that I was able to pick a little bit of a fight with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, and I think personally that my point prevailed, but maybe I'm wrong when we're talking about the relative importance of Black Panther to the African American community. But I think that you're right. I think the problem is that we tend to go balls deep with something as far as an ideology or an idea, and it blinds us to certain things. So that's where I think Jeremy made his mistake, was that he sees the wokeness in film as being a genuine problem. I agree with him there. But then he sees anything that is, say, in the case of Black Panther, just because the movie is a black-centric movie, a movie set in Africa, a movie with an entirely black cast and all that, doesn't mean that it's part of this agenda. Because Wakanda in the comic books has always been portrayed that way. They were simply being true to the source material. That being said, it was a significant achievement for the black community in the United States because they never had a movie like Black Panther before. Now, Jeremy, and again, I'm not slighting him, but this is the, if you grew up in this country white, you live a different life than if you grew up in this country black. And so to him, he doesn't see a significant difference between Black Panther and Blade. And he actually brought up Blade during our conversation. Blade is not a bad movie, and yes, it has a black lead. And so, yes, you can argue that there have been superhero films with black leads before. You can argue that there have been major films with black leads before. Denzel Washington has been in a bunch of them, right? But never before we've seen a big budget tentpole film with an entirely black cast set in Africa, celebrating Africa and showing, and not only that, but the villain having a very real, true to life black experience for his motivation as a villain. And it was just and so it was an incredibly powerful film to most blacks in America. And Jeremy just couldn't see that. He can't see past the fact that, well, a movie starring a black guy, what's the difference? We already seen that before. These people are making a big deal out of nothing. And I think that that's, unfortunately, in Jeremy's case, I think he was being ignorant of the larger experience there. And that's where I try to be, and it's difficult, I will say. I know I've done it a million times, but because we always put our own personal feelings in front of something, but if we look at it with an objective eye, you can see, you can start to see, hopefully, both sides of everything. Nightbreeze says, congratulations on 9K. Thank you, my friend. I'm very excited that the channel is moving in the right direction, and thank you to Nerdrotic, and any of you that are new because of Nerdrotic, thank you for joining the gang, because, and of course, now that I've come out as a Christian, I'm sure some of them will leave. Sci-Fi Nation says, just curious, how would the resurrection work for the other human species that are extinct because of us basically, and the humans had no knowledge of him, i.e. cavemen and before Christianity? That is an excellent question, Sci-Fi Nation. Now, prior to 2,000 years ago, of course, we had the Jewish traditions, and so that was around. So the message of Yahweh was there. It was a little bit different. And I am not an expert on rabbinic law, but my understanding is that according to the Jews, there is a certain set of laws that they have to follow, and then there's a certain set of laws for the rest of the world. And so I think that prior to Christ, the Jewish the Jewish rabbinic law would be the standard to use. I'm not an expert on that, so I really can't comment on it. Dan says, you mentioned let's see, you mentioned before making your van look more like Star Trek. Have you seen the Hot Wheels Star Trek toy vehicles? If not, Google and look at the pictures. They may not be to my taste, but, well, I actually, it's funny because I actually do have, it's not a van, it's an SUV, but yes, I ordered some decals that I'm going to be putting on it as soon as I'm able. And so when as soon as I get it done, I'm going to take pictures and show it to you guys. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But yes, I have a white SUV, and when I'm done, I'm going to do it up to look like a shuttle. Driver said, why doesn't God just obliterate or uncreate the devil? He has that power. He absolutely does. But the devil was, I think, a part of the plan, because you need to, if you have free will in this world, and God wants, people to be able to make a choice. How can you make a choice if there's no alternative? There's nothing to choose between. Why God sets it up that way, I don't know. You have to ask him. And by the way, that's one thing that I try not to answer is, anytime somebody asks a question of why does God do X, Y, or Z? Well, if I see a problem in the premise of the question, like God doesn't do X, Y, or Z, I'll address that. But I can't tell you why God does everything. I'm not a prophet. I don't speak for God. Dan says, do you like SG-1 when they go back in time to prevent something from actually happening? I'm not a big fan of time travel stories in general. Especially when it's like, oh, we need to go back in time and fix the problem. Oh, and I forgot. Yes, I need to put that number 23 up there. So thank you for the reminder, Night Breeze. I love that one. Anyway, but you see, the problem with time travel stories like that, Dan, is that there's no stakes. Because if you have a time machine and you go back and try to fix something that already happened, well, if you fail, you just go back in time again. And so it doesn't, to me, time travel stories, unless they're very well written, tend to not feel like they have all that stakes, because the time travel aspect of it removes the stakes. Carlos says, didn't the devil try to help humans disagreeing with God was cast out because he didn't see God's bigger plan? Well, there are differing thoughts as far as the devil and why he got kicked out. In Revelation, it talks about there was a war in heaven where where the devil tried to overthrow God. And then in Jewish lore, there are all sorts of interesting stories as to why the devil was kicked out. I don't think that that's as important as just recognizing what's going on right now. I think JJ's movie Super 8 was very good. He wrote and directed it. Also, Steven Spielberg produced it. Yeah, Super 8 was actually a pretty good film. I liked it. And let's see. Peter says, so 1-0 halftime. Jolinton scored. Well, good for Jolinton. Darren says, I don't get offended when someone says the Bible is magic, and it does. The Pharaoh had sorcerers who turn staffs into serpents too, just not as formidable serpents. Well, the term magic in and of itself is simply, honestly, the way I look at it, when people start talking about magic and they or even supernatural or divine, to me, it's just, I think it's the height of hubris to suggest that it is impossible. Because all that really is people channeling into some kind of energy that we today do not understand. And I think that any reputable scientist will be the first to admit that we don't know everything that there is to know about the universe. And just because we have the basic fundamental forces that we understand, like gravity, the strong, weak forces, etc., doesn't mean there's not another force that we're unaware of. Do you think that there was important people who nobody knows about in early Christianity or even in Jesus' day? I'm sure. Absolutely. And in fact, there are people mentioned in the Bible that most people have no idea who they were, but had a very significant role. Come out to Colorado sometime. I'll keep my plant-based painkillers at the ready for you. Thank you, Captain. If I'm ever in Colorado, I will definitely look you up. Because yes, I'm a big proponent of the plant-based painkillers. But I also am a big proponent on following the law, which is why I don't take them right now. I would love to, but yeah, I'm unfortunately trying not to be a hypocrite. I totally understand religion and can get behind the meaning of it to people. That's why I never joke about it. I just say that I believe in only one God less than my conversation partner. Well, and that's all right, and it's okay to, Joseph, I don't have a problem with someone who is an atheist, as long as, and we can have a good, deep conversation about stuff. I just don't like it when atheists tend to, and I'm not saying you do this because I've never seen you do this, but atheists try to fall back into some of the tired old arguments that really don't hold up. Things like the problem of evil and stuff like that. Those arguments have been done to death, and honestly, people are not going to be convinced either way by the problem of evil, or other tired old questions. We are having an oh man, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, ecumenical conversation. Yes, and I'm still not entirely awake today. Dan says, one theory is that the Death Star hyperspace generator fractured and some of the debris got sucked in and ended up in a different place if it's in another solar system. That makes sense, Dan, to a certain extent, but keep in mind we're talking about modern Star Wars. Do you really think they're going to have any kind of scientific explanation as to why the Death Star ended up there? Or are they going to say the midi-chlorians did it? Gary says, Anti-Trigger, Pastor Anti-Trigger, cool. Daniel says, morning, Anti-Trigger, how are you this morning? I'm hanging in there, Daniel. Leg is hurting, but I'm glad to be here. Some groups are better at things than others. Pygmies, on average, don't make effective basketball players than people who average over 6 feet tall. Well, that's true, but there's a difference between saying that, for example, men are physically stronger than women, right? That as a whole, yes, there are powerful, strong women, but for the most part, you take an average male and an average female in the human species, and the man is a stronger, physically stronger creature. That does not mean that the man is superior, it just means that he's stronger. And the problem is not necessarily, okay, yes, pygmy or a group of people, any group of people that tends to be short compared to a group of people that is tall, the tall people are going to have an obvious advantage in basketball, as you said. However, the short people are also going to have an obvious advantage when it comes to things like being jockeys, right? Because jockeys, for those of you that don't know, those are the people that ride racehorses. It's a sincere advantage to be as small as possible because you put less weight and drag on the horse. And so that's why if you've ever seen jockeys are very tiny people for the most part. But that doesn't make either group better. It only gives them an advantage given a specific circumstance that they happen to be, quote unquote, built for. And there's Yosef's €2 saying I need to see the bearded guy spin, hit the 23, which I did, and I don't know, does that mean I need to do another 23? Losing track, I think so. So I'm going to do 23 again just to be safe. But just to keep in mind, just because you have a physical advantage over somebody else because of your stature doesn't make you a better person. I guess that's the ultimate point there. Luke says, I'm a firm believer that diversity of opinions is important for healthy thinking. Thus, I prefer discussing a multiplicity of worldviews, religions, and irreligious. And you know what, Luke? First of all, I've known you long enough to know that that is 100% true. That's one thing I love about you is that you can discuss just about any topic and you can discuss it well. And that's something that I've always believed in too. In fact, back in the 90s, I was working for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon, and one of my favorite things to do was to have lunch with a group of people, and every single one of us was radically different from a philosophical perspective. I, at the time, was an atheist. One of our group was a Orthodox Jew. One in our group was a Catholic. One in our group was a Protestant, and one in our group was a Muslim. And we would have these really interesting, deep conversations and never agree, but always had a great time. Dan says, I've seen a mini pocket Bible and it's ridiculous small print. Yeah, you know what? You got one of these? Guess what? You can get a Bible app on there. It's a lot easier than trying to walk around with one of those mini pocket Bibles. Night Breeze wants to know how's Auntie. Auntie is doing well. She misses being up here, I will tell you that, and I miss having her up here, but hopefully soon. Luke says, I suppose other people might see no issue with mocking and name calling for no particular reason. Yeah, I don't like the mocking and name calling that people on both sides do, and so I try to avoid it. I know I sometimes I can't I admit it. I've done it, but I try not to. Peter says, well, I'm a science nerd, but I don't look down on flat earthers and climate change deniers. I try to encourage the conversation. Exactly. And that's the thing. You should be able to have that conversation with people without being a jerk, right? Like, Darren, I love Darren. He's a flat earther, and he and I have talked about it, and there's no reason to be rude or crude or anything just because he says something that you may think is patently false. You have that conversation, and you know what? If you don't agree with his answer, but you can't rebut it, then you just leave it at that. But you don't make fun of it just because you disagree with it, if that makes sense. Mr. Lundo says the real question is, were there SJW fans really fans in the first place? How many of them actually know anything substantive about Trek or the hero's journey we have seen in Star Wars? Probably very few. In fact, the SJW influence, this is a big problem in the entertainment world right now. The SJW influence is that they see that a franchise is lacking in feminism or whatever their trope of the day is. So we'll just go with feminism for right now. So they see, Star Wars is lacking feminism, so we need to make Star Wars for girls. And that's what Kathleen Kennedy's agenda was all about, is making Star Wars for girls. The problem is that Kathleen Kennedy failed to realize that Star Wars already appealed to millions of girls. Why? Because Princess Leia was an ass-kicking woman. And you didn't need to suddenly change everything to make it girl-friendly. Star Wars was already girl-friendly. Princess Leia is the very prototype of the modern, strong female character. And yet, they reduced her to basically just barely a love interest for Han. And I think the biggest shame of the new films is, why didn't The Force Awakens star Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher? Not that I have a problem with Daisy Ridley or the rest of the new actors, but the stars of that film should have been the original trio, not all these new people. Peter says, well, look, I believe that Jesus is my friend. Well, he hopefully is. Apart from weddings, funeral, and communions, I refuse to enter a church. They have hurt my family. Well, here's the thing. I understand that the churches have hurt a lot of people, right? And no church is perfect. However, as this guy behind me, Corey, has said many times, because he's brought that up many times, that people will say, oh, the church has hurt me, that's why I don't go to church. Well, you know what? If you eat some food that makes you sick, do you stop eating? Do you believe that because there are less believers in Christ today could be the reason for the downfall of our franchises, i.e. bleak future, weak leadership, no hero's journey, SJW? I actually do. And I know that some people think that, oh, you just think Jesus is everything. But the truth is that as our society moves further and further away from acknowledging a higher power and acknowledging that there is an ultimate good and an ultimate morality out there, the further we move away from that, the less we're going to see of it in our entertainment, and we become more and more nihilist. And that's what we're seeing coming out of our films, which is kind of a shame. Peter says, Yahweh, anti-trigger. Okay. I assume you mean Yahweh? I don't know. Daniel says, Revelation 17:8, the beast that thou sayest was and is not shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and that they dwell on the earth shall wonder. Okay. Interesting quote. Kind of out of context, but okay. Peter says Yahweh this time. T-Brick says, a lot of people see submission in any form, mental, physical, spiritual, as a weakness. Yet the experience and the ability to submit makes you stronger, keeps your ego in check. Unchecked egos abound. That is very, very true, T-Brick. Very well said. Darren says, I don't get offended by terms like Sky Daddy because the Lord said vengeance is mine. Well, that's true. That's a good point. But you know what? I don't seek vengeance per se, because I do believe in that whole vengeance is mine thing. But I don't. But that doesn't change the fact that if somebody says something purposely to offend God, I take offense to that, and I will correct them on that. And I will. And the thing is, if somebody is unwilling to have a conversation with civilized terms, they're not interested in a civil conversation, I'm not going to have a conversation with them. Schormer says, the Catholic Church teaches if you are ignorant of God through no fault of your own, it is possible if you live a virtuous life to get to heaven. It's called baptism of desire. I don't know the Catholic doctrine on it, but sounds reasonable, at least in the 30-second description you give of it. Darth Maul says, YouTube needs to add more characters to our text. It's difficult to make clear points. Yeah, but if they did, then people would be writing books, and it would take me 17 hours to do this live stream. And as it is, I'm so far behind, I don't know how I'm going to catch up. I'm just going to do the stuff addressed to me for a few minutes because, yeah, I'm falling way behind. Fan division, there are 3 groups in Star Trek, Prime, Kelvin, and Discovery so far. Some original fans like Prime and don't like changes like Kelvin or Discovery cause the canon. Well, the thing is that I think that it's more than just changes, right? I'm okay, like Star Trek 2009, I didn't have a major problem with. Even Star Trek Into Darkness, I know a lot of people hate that one. I did not. Star Trek Beyond I found offensive. And that's why, because Star Trek Beyond showed more political influence than the others. And of course, Star Trek Discovery is absolute crap, in my opinion. Resolute says, you definitely have I am too old for this crap vibe. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. The Discovery-looking shuttle in Picard may be a personal transport system like a taxi, but for Starfleet officers. That's possible. Darren says, I was personally touched by Killmonger's final moments in Black Panther. What a great character for that movie. Yeah, Killmonger was awesome. And I think that it's a shame that Jeremy didn't quite catch that. But I can understand. I mean, if he's lived a different life than me, and he comes from a different perspective than me, and that's okay. But, you know. Bird says, I think what Jeremy said was his friend said it was truly representative of Africa as Wakanda was more of a Western European civilization located in Africa than a true African civilization. Yeah, I got that, and I didn't dig into that much with them because I know some people feel that, but I'm sorry if then you're not paying much attention. The only reason I think people think it's westernized is because they had technology. Honestly, because if you look at most of what you saw in Wakanda, as far as, you know, the way, even like the way they shop in their city was through a bazaar, which is a more African traditional thing than a Western thing. You don't go in the United States, you don't go to a bazaar to go shopping. And they clearly, there were many things about Wakandan culture that were taken from different tribal cultures around Africa. And while yes, it's a fictional world and it's a fictional nation, I don't think that it felt Western, not to me. But some people think that, oh, well, Africans with technology, clearly that's westernized, which in of itself, you see, I didn't want to get into that because that almost sounds like you're accusing someone of being racist because you're saying that because they're advanced, they're Western. And I don't think that Jeremy's racist. Don't get me wrong. I don't think for a moment that Jeremy is racist. But I think that suggesting that Wakanda is westernized is a little on the ignorant side. That's the best way I can put it. But again, I have nothing but love for Jeremy. I think it was a lot of fun to hang out with him. Luke says, even I don't consider the Bible as a work of fiction. It's not a historical record either, though. It's a collection of works designed to convey the unifying ideological framework. That's a good way to put it, Luke. And the problem is that there are books in the Bible that are historical. There are books that are poetic. Like I said, there are books that are parables. And you have to kind of go through the whole thing. And unfortunately, the Bible doesn't have it doesn't say, by the way, this book is X. That would be so nice if it did, but it doesn't. Mr. Wolverine saying, Andrew, I just got the notification. Can finally catch a Sunday one live. Well, welcome, Mr. Wolverine. Welcome, my friend. Let's see. Stromer says, Antrigger, true free will means being able to reject God. Otherwise, we are no better than slaves. Free will gives meaning to life. It would never make our choices for God, all the more powerful. You are 100% correct. That's the thing. If you can't choose not God, then there's no point in choosing God. And that's one of the reasons that the devil has to exist. You have to have an alternative. And keep in mind that the devil is not just like this guy with a pitchfork running around going hee 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 hee, right? The devil is much more subtle than that. And so I think that people, they see Renaissance paintings and think that's what the devil is. Dude named Clem, or they see possession movies. But without the devil, he could never have gone down to Georgia and get that solid gold fiddle. That's true. That's true. Dude named Clem says, Andrew, do you believe in the multiverse theory? No, I do not. I think that the multiverse theory is complete and utter poppycock. And don't get me wrong, I understand the well, I don't understand the math. I understand of the mathematics, I should say. I'm not saying that I can't do quantum equations or anything like that, but I understand the mathematics behind it. That basically the multiverse is because quantum mechanics can predict the likelihood of a certain event, but then you end up with all these different possible answers, and so the idea of the multiverse is that all those answers are completely true. And the universe branches off into all these different directions. I think that's a load of crap. I think that that's taking a mathematical remainder and extrapolating out an entire universe of existence just so that you don't have to explain why you can't predict things accurately. I see Stuart Trekyard's in the UK. Shame I can't get to STD Birmingham. Yeah, I saw, he told me he was going to the UK. Very jealous of him. I saw a picture of him with Commander Cockings. I would love to go to the UK sometime because my family is originally Scotch-Irish, so I would and a little bit of Welsh, so I'd like to go there to check it out. Dan says, DS9 at the school. Do you think Keiko O'Brien was correct when it came to teaching about the Prophet's wormhole aliens? I'd have to go back and rewatch. I don't remember how she addressed it. It's a tough one because, that's actually an interesting one because unlike religion of today, the prophets of Deep Space Nine were actual aliens that they could actually, they actually interacted with. They understood, at least at a certain level, what they were. But they were also the foundation of the Bajoran religion. And they did this several times in Trek. Where particularly like they did in Star Trek The Next Generation, I can't remember the name of the stupid episode where Wesley was going to be executed because he broke the glass and the flowers and stuff, and there was the alien hovering over the planet that all the people on that planet worshipped. And the difference there is that, of course, they show you the answer. That, okay, look, this creature is what these people think is God, but obviously it's just a creature. As opposed to in the real world where we don't have that clear cut, God is actually some guy in a laboratory who created this universe on under a microscope. We don't actually know what God is beyond our spiritual beliefs. My grandfather was Catholic, but although I'll say this, if Keiko was teaching them what they knew about the wormhole aliens, I guess I would have to say truth before feeling good about things. I would rather know the truth of the matter than to simply believe in ignorance. My grandfather was a Catholic all his life, but he was very angry at God. I wonder how that conversation went when he passed. Interesting, Darth. I think that it is okay to be angry as long as you are angry in a submissive way. For example, and this is something that actually, I see the service is over, but Corey has actually talked about, it's okay to say, God, this sucks, and I don't like this, and I don't understand why you put me in this situation. I don't understand why you did this to me, and believe me, in the last 3 months, I've said that more times than I can count. However, ultimately, I still submit to you, your will be done. Please just show me where I'm going with this. Show me that there's a reason for all this. That's kind of it, but it's okay to be angry. It's not, but it becomes different if you put yourself above God. Bird says, not following unjust laws is patriotic, anti-tracker. It's what this country was founded on. Yeah, but you know what? Unjust laws based on what? I mean, as far as some laws are, like for example, some of the racist laws that we had in this country prior to the civil rights movement. Yes, absolutely. The right thing to do, both from a patriotic perspective and from a theological perspective, is to disobey those laws. The Bible speaks on that. If you go back to the Old Testament, and King Nebuchadnezzar had everybody bowing down to a great statue of himself, and the three, and I can always, it's like Meshach, Reshach, and Abednego, something like that, were refused to do so because they were not going to bow down to a false image, because that would go against the laws of God, which supersede the laws of man. There's biblical precedence for disobeying unjust law. That being said, there's a difference between a law that denigrates an entire group of people, like the racist laws of the first half of the 20th century in the United States, and not being able to smoke a particular herb. And so I think that there's a significant difference there. And besides that, I don't want to take a chance at losing my career and going to jail. It's just not worth the risk. Andrew, have a great day. All right, Night Breeze, take care. Azine says, are we sure it's not the same planet? It was a moon of Endor, but was it given a name? No, they did say it was a different planet. No, and the forest moon of Endor is still, for some reason, you can talk to Star Wars fans about it more than me. But my understanding is, even though it's called the forest moon of Endor, the forest moon is also called Endor, which makes no sense, but whatever. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. That is true. New Star Wars introduced hyperspace ramming, so I guess they could introduce something else that's totally not done before. That's also true. BIRDOPREY says we're putting our best jockey out to stud. Okay, not sure why you're saying that. Short people have an advantage of crawling through small tunnels. That is actually true. Mage Grey says, just discovered this fan project that despecialized the Star Wars trilogy, so it's like DVD release, the original cut. Yes, I actually have the despecialized edition. Also, by the way, Mage, I would highly recommend, and by the way, number one, I only recommend downloading these edits of Star Wars if you legitimately own Star Wars. It is not illegal to download an edit of Star Wars if you own it. If you don't own it, that's a little different. I don't want, and I do not advocate breaking the law. However, I do own all the Star Wars films, so I can do this with a clear conscience. I also downloaded the anti-cheese edit, which is a re-edit particularly of the prequels, and you'll be amazed at how good Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is with the anti-cheese edit. Just do a search for the anti-cheese edit, you'll find it. They cut out a lot of Jar Jar stuff, and I think in Episode 1 they cut like over 30 minutes out of the film. But it's really, really good. Let's see. Episode 9 is 155-minute runtime. Yes. Better be good. Let's see. I want to make a block 3D spinning Spock hologram in Space Visioneers. That would be awesome. Enter, why don't you become a jockey and you could be Michael of Khazak Doom, the kingdom under the mountain, riding for Doran IV on his horse Shadowfax, because you're a hobbit. Because I'm not really a hobbit. Do you feel Mary Magdalene was a disciple or an actual apostle? She was who risen Christ appeared to first, after all. That's a good question. I don't know. There's, unfortunately not enough detail is given in what we have. I do think that I do think that contrary to popular opinion, that the Bible is definitely not, particularly the New Testament, is definitely not as sexist as people think it is. Who needs 155 minutes when a single line of starting text crawl can retcon anything? That's true. Hopefully I don't know what they're going to do, but we'll find out. Have you looked at any of the Art of Star Wars books? Is there anything in them that you wish was in the movies made for something in Star Wars? I've seen some of the Art of Star Wars books. I kind of like some of the older original designs of Vader. I like the older designs of the lightsaber. If you look in some of the old pictures, the way the lightsaber looked more like a flame shooting out of it. But, you know, I understand now, difficult to do even today. There are a lot of things in the that I like from the concept art that never made it. And I think a lot of it that gets cut out, it's because it's impractical. One of the heads was having been slain to death, and its wound of the death was healed. The whole earth marveled after the beast. Yes, Daniel, you're mentioning that a lot. Gary says, Andrew, in many ways, the art of the debate has been lost since it would require people to see beyond their own viewpoint. Very true. And that's something that drives me crazy. I love a good fight, argument, whatever you want to call it. But in order to have an effective argument with somebody, yes, you have to be able to listen to the other person's perspective, understand it, digest it, and then come up with a response. But what we do today is we cut it off and don't listen and just make fun of what the other person said and then assert our position. That's not an argument. Hey, it's the Obi-Wan of Alpacans wandering the deserts. Some religions believe you should not swear, but some people believe you can if the swear word was in the Bible. Well, the Bible speaks against using offensive language. However, offensive language changes with the times. And so I think what the Bible is basically saying is don't say things purposely to offend other people. The Bible also speaks against swearing in the literal sense, meaning that you should, and this is something I've talked about before, but for example, if I was called to testify in court, it is inappropriate for a Christian to put their hand on a Bible and solemnly swear to tell the truth. That is actually going against what the Bible says to do. So I would take the option to not have the Bible and solemnly affirm, because that is closer to being biblical. Let's see. Peter says, I'm going to try something with the Sims 3 and Trigger. Going to record a vid. All right, well, can't wait to see it. Admiral Saval is here saying, yo, Mike, how you doing, Admiral? Daniel says, a friend of mine would talk about the scripture I mentioned, and he would tell me that that in the future, the Antichrist would be born to a woman, and he would grow up and become the king of the world. I think that based on what you see in Revelation, the Antichrist will definitely be a political figure. The people behind the trouble with Edward know nothing of Star Trek. If that female captain is still captain later on, I would be very upset if I watched the show. I don't know if we're ever going to see her again. I'm sure she was just a one-off character, but the trouble with Edward, yeah, was a mess. Peter says, see you Tuesday, editor. All right, Peter, have a good one, my friend. All right, let's see. Back, man, I got lost. The chat's jumping all over because I'm so far behind. No, I don't eat that food or touch it. I'm angry at the church, not God. He didn't do what was done. Well, Darth, I understand if you're angry at the church because of what happened, that's perfectly fine. But then you need to find it in yourself, A, to forgive them. That is what you are called to do. If you truly believe in what the Bible says, you need to forgive them. And if that church, if you can't bring yourself to go back to that church, find another church. And I understand it's difficult, especially if you're Catholic, to say, well, I can't go to a Protestant church, then go to a Lutheran church. Find something. Cinnamon says, Jesus told me to take the day off. Indeed, he did. From my point of view, modern feminism pushed the original equality idea too far in hope to design an interchangeable humans. They strive to create sexual morphologies and mindsets and fail. That's an interesting way to put it, Luke. I think that, yeah, the modern feminism, I actually don't think that's what they're doing. Well, in some ways, yes. They're trying to say that there's literally no difference between a man and a woman, which is absolutely stupid. To say that there's no difference is stupid. But I think the reason is that they can't see that things can be different and yet equal, meaning both are equally valuable. They think that if there are differences, that one must be better than the other. And it's kind of like what we were talking earlier, like obviously a person who is 6'6" is going to have an advantage over someone who's 5 feet tall in basketball. That doesn't mean the person that's 6'6" is a better person. It just means they have an advantage in that category. However, the person that's 5 feet tall would make a much better jockey, or if you had to crawl through something small, they'd be better at doing that. You know, there are definite advantages to every body type that there is. Now, some people who are born with disabilities and stuff, boy, they have a tough one. But the thing is that your value as a human being is not based on your abilities or your physical strength. Your value comes from basically you being your soul. But if you don't believe in a soul, then you got to find something else. Things about Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker kissing. Some of it was deleted scenes. Not sure. Let's see. Not sure what you're talking about there, Dan. I don't want to see Luke and Princess Leia kiss again, though. The first scripture freaked me out as kind. Let's see. That first scripture freaked me out as a kind, because there is something living in the earth. You talking about the beast that rose from the earth? I think that you first of all, Daniel, you have to understand that almost nothing in the book of Revelation is to be taken literally. That is written in apocryphic language, and that is very difficult to interpret. So don't think that just because it says a beast rises from the earth, that literally means that there's a beast underground that comes out of the ground. What it generally is meaning, you have to look at what is the symbolic meaning of earth, the symbolic meaning of beast, and the symbolic meaning of rise, because it's not what you're thinking. And it's a little too deep to get into right now, but we may do, once I get the religious channel up and running, we may do a study on Revelation, because it's worth talking about. Joseph says faith and church must be seen as two different entities. Well, faith and church are related. They're not. The church is simply the gathering of people of a common faith. Faith is what you have in God, right? Faith and people misunderstand faith too. They think faith is believing in something that you don't see. But really what faith ultimately is a trust in God. It's not you should already believe in God. You can't have faith in God if you don't already believe that God exists. Dr. Alex is in the house, says, afternoon, Anti-Checkout. How are you doing, Doctor? Carlos says, I do think that the Bible gives a good way to be a moral person, treat others how you want to be treated, and teach, but understand others' ideals. We should all get along. We are all human. Yeah, well, in the Bible, I think Christ puts it very well when someone asks him what the ultimate commandment is to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and to love your fellow man, to love your neighbor as yourself. And by the way, in that, there was one pastor I knew, a guy named Steve in Oregon, who taught that implies a hidden third commandment, which is that you must love yourself, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people loathe themselves. But yes, you need to love yourself, because you can't love others like yourself if you don't love yourself. So there's really 3 things you have to do. Even BIRDOPREY 5 didn't lose an entire ship to tribbles. Give him time. Luke says, but why would you take offense for God, though? I understand disliking someone for being rude. I don't understand taking defense for God. Wouldn't that be supremely arrogant? Well, when I say I take offense, I mean, I find it offensive that someone is doing something basically in a disrespectful way towards God. I don't, and yes, I find it offensive. Am I going to go, oh my God? Oh? No, but I find it offensive because that's what it is. It is an offense against my beliefs. Now, if you want to say invisible sky daddy, or you believe in fairy tales or whatever, that's your prerogative. But then I will ultimately not want to engage you in conversation, because I can see that you are an immature, weak-minded bigot. And I'm not interested in talking to an immature, weak-minded bigot. Of course, I'm not calling you that, Luke. Cinnamon says, when is your new video you mentioned the other day going up? Well, I may not do it because, I'll tell you, Cinnamon, honestly, Mr. Miles, unfortunately, he's not here right now, but he spent a lot of time talking me out of making that video, because he was afraid that I was going to alienate a lot of my audience by talking about this particular subject. And just so you know, what Cinnamon is talking about is I was talking about doing a video about what is the real reason that Discovery doesn't feel like Trek. Because I did a little bit of digging around as far as some of the reasons that people from both sides, both defenders and people who don't like Discovery, things that they don't the reason that they think that people don't think it feels like Trek. Now, some of them are patently false. Like, for example, one of them is there's a black female lead, right? One is far left-leaning politics, the darker tone, the serialized storylines, the emphasis on action, all the canon violations or retcons, the existence of the Kling orcs, and the number one thing that I hear, it does not fit Gene Roddenberry's vision of Trek. And I was going to systematically demonstrate that none of those are in fact true. And so Mr. Miles was saying I should not do that because by doing that, it comes across as either I'm defending Star Trek Discovery or I'm attacking Star Trek as a whole, and I would drive a lot of people away from the channel. However, then I would finish the video by showing what I do think is the real reason that Discovery is different than Trek. Now, I may do a variation on that theme in the future, so I'm not going to give away what I think is the real core reason that why Discovery doesn't feel like Trek. But, I can understand why Mr. Miles is cautious, we'll say, about doing that. Luke says, Wakanda isn't westernized, but it was an isolationist, xenophobic nation and a tiny bit racist too in the movie. Not by much, though. The colonizer bit comes to mind as evidence of that. Well, no, and that's actually a good thing because they show, and that's something I appreciated about it, is that any kind of isolationist, xenophobic nation needs to be enlightened. And that's where T'Challa's journey in that film was to the realization that isolationism and xenophobia is wrong. So yeah, I think that was actually a positive thing about the film. Nicole was in the house, says, hello, turds, birds, guys and dolls, nerds too. Hey, Nicole. Dan says, TV show Friends and the character of Ross was Judaism, but he also a paleontologist who believed the evolution of man and really loved dinosaurs. I never got into Friends, so I don't know anything about it. Darth Maul says, I love Black Panther. I fell for Killmonger and T'Challa in the end. I saw and understood both sides of their view. Killmonger was a tragic character. He certainly was. Killmonger was one of the... I really liked him as a villain. I was sad that they killed him, but I think that they had to. But I was really sad that they did. I would love to see him come back. But the problem is if he came back, well, we got the power of his position in that film. And so anything beyond that, he would just become a two-dimensional villain. Darren says, what I also like about Black Panther was that there was a good white dude and a bad white dude. The good white dude, played by Bilbo, got to do something heroic in the film. Yeah, but the thing is that, yeah, and I actually biffed this when I was talking to Jeremy about it. There were actually two white characters in the film. I said one when I was thinking about Bilbo, but I forgot about Claw. But the thing is that, yeah, and the other thing I thought was kind of cool was that Bilbo, while he did do something heroic, didn't save Wakanda, right? He wasn't the hero of the story. He wasn't a white savior film. And Claw was not the main villain, and so it was not a white devil film either, right? The main hero and the main villain were both African. And I actually thought that was a bold move. And granted, it was the correct move, but it was a bold one. The Bible's a book of books and also a book of stories. Also, good morning. Good morning, Steve. Darren says, speaking of superhero films, I also like the take of the God of War Ares from Wonder Woman movie. He was basically the devil in how he operated. He kind of was, although I got to say, I think the Ares part of Wonder Woman was probably the weakest part of that film. Admiral Smalls, did God really give us complete free will? That's the idea of libertarian free will. No. I don't believe so. But that doesn't mean that we don't have free will. It means that there are certain things that, like, for example, we are, think about your personal tastes, right? Some things aren't genetic, and that by that, as far as our tastes, our likes, our dislikes, some of that does not, come from a total choice. You can't have libertarian free will in the sense that, like, whether or not you think chocolate tastes better than vanilla or something. But I do think we do have free will to the extent that it can be had. Dr. Ox is anti-trigger. Speaking of the devil, me... I see. Now, that's a good way to do it, Dr. Ox. You say, speak of the devil, me. In other words, you are the devil. So that's all I should have to read, but let's continue. Speaking of the devil, me and my friend dressed as Lucifer and Massikin for early Halloween party. Of course you did. Actually, my daughter, Little Miss Anti-Tricker, and her boyfriend dressed up as a pair of demons at some Halloween party as well. Recently, a scientist was quoted as saying God was math code. Well, that's how a lot of scientists see God, as being the ultimate, in a sense. Like Stephen Hawking even talked about if you had a single equation that could define everything, then you could know the mind of God, right? That was something that Stephen Hawking was famous for saying. And a lot of scientists feel that way. Irish Trekkie reviewed the new XL DS9 from Eagle Mouse at the convention yesterday. No video on the XL Katinga yet, but I'm looking forward to that review. Yeah, I want to see that XL Katinga. That one, oh man, that looks awesome. And then Darren says in quotes, Haven, not sure why. Daniel says, enter for it, God, let's see. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to Tartarus, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, or I heard for 1,000 generations. Well, I'm not sure what the relevance of that is, but true. Darren says, I liked that the God in that TNG episode was also the battle station and conundrum. Oh, I didn't even notice that, but yeah, I think you're right. That's funny. Mike Richards is here from Columbus, Ohio, as usual. Mike, welcome. DJ says, if you get a second, you really need to see that newest video of mine and the ultimate in my insanity. Well, DJ, I will definitely check out your video when let me see, where is it? Oh, you got your T-Rex. All right, so let's take a look here. By the way, DJ, you're up to 168 subscribers. That's good. So let's go over to this screen here. So this is, just so you know, this is DJ Odyssey's page. If you are not a subscriber to DJ Odyssey, you should be. DJ is the real Bird of Prey, I see. That's different. All right, so let's take a look here. So there's DJ in his T-Rex outfit.
How's it looking?
All right.
So this is the whole video. You just running around in circles and.
Can't see a damn thing in this.
So here you go, DJ Odyssey. Apparently the bunny has been eaten by a T-Rex. So are you going to do something, or are you just going to stand there? I'll skip ahead a little bit.
Good one.
All right. Well, there you go. And let's go back to the chat. Admiral says, why is religious radicals that believe that you get 72 virgins when you kill innocents? Well, that's actually, in my humble opinion, what you see there, and that's something you see in certain radical factions of Islam, as simply a way to convince people to do horrible things. Honestly, I don't see, and quite frankly, I'm not an expert on the Quran, and I would leave that to any of my Muslim friends to comment on, but I don't see in the Quran anything about it. Andrew, what's your opinion on monks? Some make really good wine. I think that being a monk is an interesting lifestyle choice, because I kind of see it, I have mixed feelings about it, because it kind of seems like a waste to me. Because as a monk, you dedicate yourself to God, which is a good thing, but then you vow never to have any personal possessions, you isolate yourself from the world, and you don't do anything. And that I see as a negative. I think to be a good Christian, you need to be out there in the world talking to people. Like, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but like right now, I'm not sitting here building up a wall and isolating myself from you guys. I'm engaging and talking to you guys, and that's what we're supposed to do. But people think that the whole idea of not being corrupted by the world means you have to be separate from the world, and that is an absolute mistake. Daniel says, a friend of mine told me the beast would become the king of the world, and he will change laws so someone will try to assassinate him and probably shoot him in the head, and he will regenerate. That's a possibility, but here's the thing, Daniel. I wouldn't get worked up about that. I think that people that get worked up over the minutia of it lose sight of the big picture. What you need to do, as far as assuming you're a believer, is to focus in on what you truly believe and what it's really all about. And what was that? Oh, that was looks like the 11 o'clock service stream is starting, so let me refresh it here. And that's not it. Let's go to Experience Community's page, and here's the 11 o'clock. All right, there we go. So we'll see if Andrew comes out again to do the announcements in a few minutes. All right. The church is buffering. Yeah, that's because it was between services. The original fan edit, Granddaddy, was Phantom Edit, which originally cut the cheese. Unfortunately, they were only working with VHS. Yeah, the newer anti-cheese edit, if you haven't seen it, Dr. Alex, you can download the anti-cheese edit. It's really good. I have all the Star Wars films on DVD except for the Clone Wars movie that later came out in the TV show. I never watched the Clone Wars, but yeah, I have all the movies. Did you hear Abu Bakr, I'm not going to pronounce all that, was liked by the Army Rangers? Nope, never heard that. And the world shall wonder after the beast if the future president got shot in the head and he got back up, we would be screaming that it's not human. I don't know about that. I think people would say it was a miraculous recovery. And think about it. We had a congressperson a few years ago got shot in the head and she recovered just fine. And I believe she's still serving. So it's not like it hasn't happened in the past. Sorry, I keep talking about Trouble with Edward. It's the only short trek I've seen, and it makes me angry that such people are allowed to run Star Trek. I totally understand, Darren. Trouble with Edward, and it's not even the worst of the short treks. You should watch the other one. Oh, man, it was way worse. Women like that used to be the ones who made fun of Star Trek fans in high school. Now they're running it. It's infuriating like Marvel Comics. It truly is. Star Trek and Star Wars and Marvel Comics and so many other institutions of nerddom are under the control of people who don't give a crap about what those franchises really mean. Daniel says, Antrigger, possibly it's not possible that the future that Jesus spoke of and in Revelations happened in a parallel universe, another future, not necessarily our future. You see, I don't buy that for a minute. I don't think that I'm not getting alternate timelines and stuff until I see some evidence that there's such a thing as alternate timelines. I am not buying any kind of divided universe theory or anything like that. I don't buy into that. Rogue One and Solo did not have a text crawl at the beginning. Do you want future Star Wars films to still have one? I like the text crawl. I think it's a neat Star Wars trope, and I think that getting rid of it is a mistake. Let's see. Every person I've ever met with has the same disability and that none of them can fly without an assistive device. That's very true. Robert Smith says, in all Star Trek doctors, where would you rank them? Phlox, Bashir, McCoy, Crusher, Pulaski, and the EMH doctor. Well, that's a tough one. There's different ways to rate them, like by skill level, by bedside manner, by just overall competence, that kind of thing. Or by whether or not you think they would take care of you. So I'll say this. It's hard for me to pick, like, as far as raw skill, I think that the EMH would have to be on top because he's basically a machine and he can absorb any medical information instantaneously. After that, as far as skill, I would have to go with Bashir with his enhanced abilities. Then it's kind of the tough one. I would kind of do a toss-up as far as skill between McCoy and Pulaski. Pulaski, I think, is more book smart than McCoy, but McCoy seems to be more able to improvise than Pulaski. So I would kind of put them as a tie. Crusher and Phlox would round out the bottom of the list, where I think that Crusher is just like your average doctor, and Phlox kind of comes across as a nutcase with a bunch of herbs. Uncle Remus says, have a great day. Have a good one, my friend. And Major Ray Rose, what is the basis of that trust or faith in God? Well, that's a tough one. And that's the thing. Offering is, think about the way that Spock puts it in Star Trek 6, I think is a good way to put it. He tells his young Vulcan protege that you must have faith. And she's like, in what? That the universe will unfold as it should. That's kind of how I see my faith in God. That ultimately, whatever happens to me, the universe will unfold as it should. And it's tough because sometimes you have to realize that God's grand scheme for things may not be that I get to win the lottery. I would love to win the lottery. I wish God would give me a winning lottery ticket right now. I would just love it if God would just, magically give me enough subscribers so that I could quit my job tomorrow and do this full time. Honestly, more than anything else, that I would love for God to do that. But I have to recognize that in the grand scheme of the universe is going to unfold the way God wants it. That's ultimately the way the universe needs to unfold. And if that means that I have to struggle my whole life, so be it. And that's where that faith, that trust comes in, that regardless of my position in the universe is going to go in the direction it should. And after this life, things will be all right, even if you had a sucky life. Faith is trusting obedience to the known will of God. That is a good way to put it, Gary. I'm looking forward to your faith-based channel. I haven't been enticed by others to sub. Would have thought a Trek. Who would have thought Trek would lead to faith? Well, that's cool, Darth Maul. I'm looking forward to getting it up and running. I'm going to do some more work on it this afternoon. I also need to get some stuff done to get some content onto this channel because I've been sorely lacking in that. And I know that drives Mr. Miles absolutely nuts. Just a theory, but because the universe is splintering into other universes every second infinity, if it's possible that Jesus saw a future, not necessarily the future, no, I don't buy multiple universes. There is zero evidence to this, besides the fact that an actualized infinite is an impossibility, and there would have to be an infinite number of universes. So that in and of itself makes it a logical impossibility. Steve Shives is an atheist, and he said people make crap up. Today, is it possible that people thousands of years ago could make stuff up and the Bible is false? Well, Steve Shives, yes, he is a strong atheist. He and I have discussed religious topics in the past. And he's one of those atheists that I don't like talking about theology with because he's a jerk when it comes to that stuff. He will say that, you believe in the invisible sky daddy and fairy tales and all that crap that I find offensive. However, the problem with they just made it all up theory, which is what most atheists say about religion, that organized religion was created as a method of controlling the populace. And because that seems like a logical route to go. If religion is false, then why does it exist? Well, it exists to keep the population under control. But if you look at the origins of Christianity in particular, I'm not talking about other major religions because I'm not an expert on all religions. But if you look at the origins of Christianity, of the original disciples, all but one of them were executed and died a horrific, violent death. And all of them had the opportunity to avoid said horrific, violent death if they would simply recant their belief in Christ. And yet they didn't. Now, I think that is an interesting argument against it's simply for popular control, because if you were one of those architects of a false religion, let's say that some of us, and Luke put €5 into the chat, says, but wait, if you think the universe will unfold according to God's grand scheme, if that means you're thinking the universe has a design, let's see, it means that you're thinking the universe has a design. I do think the universe has a design. But I don't think that we can conceive of the entire design, Luke. So I do think that there is a design to the grand scheme to the universe. I don't pretend to understand what God's ultimate purpose with the universe is. And that would be the height of hubris and arrogance for me to suggest that I do. Anybody that tells you that they know why, why all this stuff is, why God does what he does, those people are Batwoman crazy, in my opinion. Anyway, but back to, if these people were executed, and some of them, like, what was it? Peter was crucified while hanging upside down on a cross, which, by the way, contrary to popular movies, an upside down cross is not a satanic symbol. The reason that Peter was crucified on a cross upside down had nothing to do with Satanism. It was because he felt he was unworthy to be crucified right side up like Christ was. But these people died horrific deaths in the name of their faith, and they could have avoided said horrific deaths had they recanted their faith. Would you be, if you were part of a false religion, if let's say that a group of us got together right now and we created, anti-truckerism as a religious belief, and that I was now the new savior of mankind, right? And then I got arrested and killed, and then someone pointed a gun at your head and said, yeah, you're going to denounce anti-truckerism or we're going to shoot you in the head. I would dare say that you would recant because you knew it was a load of crap, right? Literally. You knew that it was a lie, and so I would not be willing to, when I knew for a fact that it was false, why would I be willing to be an example made of the authenticity of it? No, I would immediately recant. Mr. Wolverine says, really enjoying the stream. Thanks for doing these Sunday streams. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. It's good to know that the fandom sells intelligent people who can talk honestly about faith. Thank you. I truly appreciate that, Mr. Wolverine. I'm going to wrap it up in a minute here, but all of you that are, with your kind words, I truly appreciate it. Ms. Londell says, chocolate does indeed taste better than vanilla. Free will has nothing to do with it. That's just a fact. But you see, the funny thing is, there are some people that truly believe, and I don't understand it because I agree. I think chocolate is definitely superior to vanilla, but there are people that would, strangely enough, disagree with you. Daniel says, Antrigger, did the fallen angels to Gid send the fallen angels, I assume angels, to Tartarus for 100 generations. I thought you said 1,000 earlier. There are some people who say the fallen angels got free and because they're the gray aliens that we see today. Yeah, I don't buy that. If there are aliens, there are aliens. And by the way, the existence of extraterrestrials does not shake my idea of faith. I think it's entirely possible that there are aliens all over the galaxy, and that doesn't change the idea that there is a God. If God rewards the good and the devil punishes the bad, they are actually more similar than opposite sides of a coin. Well, that's actually an interesting, that's the premise of the Lucifer show, is that the devil isn't necessarily bad. He believes in justice and he believes in punishing the wicked. But that is a false premise, Joseph, and that's a problem that a lot of people don't understand. That's not what the devil does. The devil is not in hell poking people with a pitchfork and putting them in boiling oil and stuff. The devil is not in charge in hell. He is the first victim of hell. But of course, people have differing opinions of what hell is. Some people believe that hell is simple separation from God. Some people think that hell is complete and utter destruction, as in complete non-existence. Other people believe hell is some kind of eternity of torture. I tend to fall into the utter destruction category. Stephen Hawking said God can't exist because nothing existed before time. He went on to say that space and time spontaneously erupted out of nothing, as science could support that. I know, and Stephen Hawking, unfortunately, this is, and I know you said one of two, but I don't see where the second half of that is, Schromer. There it is, 2 of 2. Now I lost it. Dang it. Sorry, where is... Come on. Okay. For this reason, dismissing the possibility of God but accepting the universe can come out of nothing is why I find it difficult to debate atheists when they refuse even the possibility of God. Yes. So Stephen Hawking, Stephen Hawking in his earlier days would say things like, God, the mind of God is mathematics and that kind of thing, and I could get behind that. In his later days, when he started talking about basically taking philosophy and trying to apply mathematics to philosophy and failing miserably at it, then I have a problem. Stephen Hawking is basically arguing for a logical impossibility just because he can show a mathematical equation that, you know, that may or may not support this, right? And I don't pretend to understand Hawking's math. I know Dr. Alex could probably understand Hawking's math, but the mathematics behind it doesn't change the fact that if you truly have nothing, like a true nothing, something is not going to just pop into existence without some kind of divine influence. By the way, there's Mr. Andrew. You can see he's shaved his head now, trimmed his beard up. But yes, that is Mr. But wait, that is him giving the announcements at our church. That is live. He's doing it right now. So let's see. What's he talking about? Do I have the remote here? What are you talking about, Andrew? Let's see.
Life groups, student ministries, service opportunities. We would love to meet you guys and chat with you guys. So
see, even sounds like the but wait.
If you need anything answered today. Next up, our next class is going to be November 11th.
So there you go. There's Andrew. You all got to hear Andrew's real voice. It was probably pretty faint, but yeah. Anyway, but anybody that refuses to acknowledge the possibility that they're wrong is a bigot. That's the very definition of bigotry. Mike Richards says, one of the most important things I've learned is that it's better to be kind than to be right. Well, as far as if you're talking about in an argument, you're right. But I think that truth trumps feeling for sure. But yes, kindness trumps basically being aggressively putting someone down. However, I think that you should, while I do believe you should be kind, I believe that you should also speak in truth. Kill ISIS leader was killed by an army. Let's see. Kill ISIS leader was killed by Army Ranger in an op last night? Question mark. Don't know. Did that happen? Okay, if so, hoorah. Do future Star Wars get an episodic title? That's a good question. Obviously, Episode 9 will, but will there be an Episode 10 is the real question. And if there is an Episode 10, since they say Episode 9 is the end of the Skywalker saga, what will Episode 10 be about? I personally am very disturbed by the idea that this is the end of the Skywalker saga. I want the Skywalker saga to go on forever, but no, they're not going to do it. They're just going to frickin', make it about girls or something. Daniel says, Lore versus Dr. Crusher. Well, it depends on what the contest is. As far as medical practice, Dr. Crusher would obviously win. In a physical battle, if Lore took off his shirt, Dr. Crusher's eyes would melt and she would just disintegrate. So that would kind of win it for Lore. I'll be doing a top 3 favorite doctors in Star Trek video once I get the second O'Brien video finished. Very cool. I look forward to it, Darren. By the way, Darren, look forward to my response to your video that was a response to me. Hopefully, I haven't talked to Mr. Miles, but I know he's been editing it. So, but yesterday I never got online because I was just so exhausted. Oh, that's weird. Screen froze. Let me see. Hopefully you guys can still hear me, but it looks like the screen is frozen. Let me turn the camera off, turn it back on. Nope, that's not doing anything. Well, that's a problem. And that's a horrible picture of me, too. And so, what the heck is going on? All right, so I'm going to unplug the camera. And plug it back in. Come on. All right, and thank you, Joe. Joe sent me the message that you could still hear me, even though the camera was kind of effed up. So, wow, now it's kind of blurry for some reason. I don't know why, but oh well, that's weird. Might be. I wonder if I got something on the. Well, it doesn't seem like it, but it's just acting weird. Anyway, we'll be done in a minute anyway. Multi-Gunman says, how's it going? Hanging in there, my friend. You don't have a sucky life. You're married to Mrs. Antricker and have 2 great kids. Well, that is true. Aaron says, good morning, Antricker. Hope things are going well. I'm going to hop out of church before I bring the flames and sulfur. All right. Darren says, I don't believe in alternate realities because because that would invalidate Christ's sacrifice on the cross, among other things. Well, it would invalidate almost the meaning of anything that you possibly do, because everything you do, you could do, you did. Hey, you know what? There's 8 trillion realities in which I won the lottery. But this one I didn't. Well, this is the only reality I care about. Now there's Luke's €5. Thank you again, Mr. Luke. I truly appreciate it. Thoughts on free will over pre-written destiny? Well, actually, it's pretty simple. I believe we have free will, but I think that there are certain events that God does, in fact, orchestrate. And when God needs to, he can override free will. He basically has he's God, so he can do whatever the heck he wants. And so, and a perfect example of this, and I think one of the biggest problems that people that argue for predestination from a theological perspective, one of the biggest problems they run into is the case of Pharaoh in ancient Egypt, because Pharaoh had free will, but God usurped his free will and forced him to not release the Jews. It's in the Bible. And so if God superseded his free will, then that means he had to have free will. Now, if you are a non-theist, if you are an atheist, then I would dare say that the only logical position you can argue is predestination, meaning that the universe will unfold the only way it can possibly unfold, and because every thought is just a chemical reaction or reaction to stimuli, all that is preset. The universe will go the way it has to, because everything is just a natural reaction to the previous action. Not only did the original disciples not recant, look at the Christians and the Romans tortured and killed who refused to recant their faith. Yes. And if you truly didn't believe it, I don't think you would be willing to be tortured for it. Any nerd worth his salt knows the grand scheme of everything is 42. That is very true. 42 is the ultimate answer. The problem is we don't understand the question. Carlos says, LOL, I'll take the bullet. Long live anti-trickerism. All right. Well, you, my friend, are a fool then, because I do not recommend anybody take a bullet for me. You should call your religious channel ITAT, which stands for I Truly Appreciate That. That's funny, but no, I think I'm going to keep the name what it is, Rational Roundtable, because I like the concept behind that. But I do say I truly appreciate that too much, don't I? Dang. You got me. You create a new religion. Who's your devil, Bird or Ryan Johnson? Well, it's funny because, yeah, Bird is actually the devil, but Ryan Johnson is one of his demons. Great team as always, bud. Live long in alpaca. Thank you, Sci-Fi. I like this later start time for church life. Make it so. Well, that's only because I've been so exhausted. I don't know what my schedule's going to be coming up. Because unfortunately, you know, during these last few weeks, I've been able to stream pretty much whenever I wanted. So, like, this stream is going ridiculously long at this point. And if I was back at work, you know, once my surgery, when I'm recovered from my surgery, when I'm back to work, I'd be at work over an hour already. Because my work time started at 10 o'clock, and it's 11:17 my time. However, I don't know what my schedule is going to be next week or the week after. So I'll do what I can. Once I am able to support myself just through YouTube, then obviously I'll probably be doing marathon streams every Sunday, because I love these streams. These are the best to me. I really love getting into these deep topics with you guys, and you guys seem to appreciate it as well. So, but it'll probably be over on the other channel. Mage says, I disagree. The chocolate is superior to vanilla. Vanilla goes with any topping and tastes good on its own. Well, there you go. See, there's one person who is obviously a heretic. Let's see. Yosef says, we're signed into the anti-church already. It's called a subscription, and it's full of poop. LOL. But if I was threatened, I would unsub, but watch anyway. Mr. Cat says, isn't hell Karoga? Well, we just call it Karoga. But, yeah. Richie says, I know what hell is. I was married for 9 years. Well, I know what heaven is. I've been married for over 25. Give me vanilla lattes all day, maybe French vanilla ice cream, but chocolate ice cream all day. Also, new idea for me, Captain Vanilla for no modded game. Let's play. The devil isn't even in hell right now. According to scripture, he roams heaven and earth for now. Yes, hell is, and that's the funny thing, because people think hell is like the devil's base of operations. No! Hell is not a good place for anybody, including devil. So but that's all. That's unfortunately that's where modern mythology comes into play. This whole thing with the devil ruling in hell is just silly. Not to be rude, but what do you think? But what do you think when people have sex and they say they saw God? I have never ever talked to anyone that genuinely said that. I've never ever met a person that said that, so I don't really have an opinion on it, except to say that I will tell you that, in my humble opinion, the closest thing on this earth there is to understanding what it's like to be in the presence of God is at that one particular moment during sex. So I think that that's the closest thing, and I think that even that, based on what the descriptions are, I think even that pales to compare, but I think that's the closest there is on earth to experiencing the presence of God. Hell is being strapped to a chair like in A Clockwork Orange with Star Trek Discovery on an eternal loop. That would definitely be bad. That would be bad. Sledgehammer's in the house. Haven't seen you in a little bit. How you doing? Luke says, long live Andrew. He liked The Last Jedi, so we don't have to. Yes, Andrew does actually like The Last Jedi. He doesn't think it's the greatest thing ever, but he did enjoy that film. So yes, we can all get mad at him for that. How can something exist before anything exists to make it exist? Well, that's kind of the problem with the naturalist view on the universe. With the from a theological perspective, you can get into, and I've talked about it before, as far as how God basically created himself, but if he can exist outside of time and space, he can exist all the way back to the beginning and create the universe. But that's a whole, believe me, that's something I'll probably get into in detail on the other channel once I get it going. I admit I'm wrong like 99% of the time. That does make me 1%, does that make me a 1% bigot? Well, it depends on the topic. I mean, there's things, for example, there's only one thing you can say with 100% certainty, and that is self-existence. I think, therefore I am. I know for an absolute fact that I exist. I know for an absolute fact that I have free will, that I am an individual conscious being. I can say that with 100% certainty. Beyond that, like if I want to say, does this can actually exist? Well, it certainly seems to. All the evidence points to it. I have no reason to think it doesn't exist, but it is possible that I'm living in a matrix-like simulation, and this is only, information being fed directly into my brain, and that this can doesn't actually physically exist. So I have to acknowledge that fact. That being said, I'm pretty sure the can exists. Some people think we exist because at some point we go back in time and create our existence, and then it starts the process off. Well, I think that that's kind of similar to God's existence. Darren says, I know you weren't online yesterday. I pestered you on Skype all day like a fan. Yeah, I did not get on Skype at all yesterday. Darren's got to get ready for company. Ta, have a good one, Darren. And let's see, I do need to wrap it up here. Luke says, if you think the universe follows a divine design, then how can you accept the multiple physical existence? Let's see, if you think the universe follows a divine design, then how can you accept the multiple physical evidence of the contrary, from the lack of fine-tuning to the absence of direction? What is the evidence of a lack of fine-tuning or the absence of direction? I'm very curious to see what is the actual evidence that there is no direction, because that would assume that you know what the direction should be. Max X says, enjoyed your presence with Nerdotic on Friday night. It was a good time. Thank you. I had a great time. I hope that Nerdotic has me back on. I'm writing on your t-shirt right now. It's weird and blurry. Yeah, everything is kind of blurry since the webcam messed up. I'm gonna have to mess with that before my next stream. I hope that I can get that working right. Robert says, oh gosh, a name I'm not going to pronounce, was an Egyptian pharaoh. He was famous for changing the traditional religion of Egyptian from the worship of many gods to the worship of a single god. Well, good for that person. They got closer to the truth, in my opinion. I do think monotheism is the only logical theological position. 2 hours plus in the stream. Yes, that's one of the reasons I need to wrap it up. My leg is killing me at this point. The problem when you want to discuss the ins and outs of free will of the Pharaoh and Exodus with an atheist is that there's zero archaeological evidence that the Hebrews were there. Not entirely true. Well, as far as the Hebrews directly, they're not called Hebrews, but there is evidence that there were people that were the slaves of the Egyptians. There is a certain amount of archaeological evidence for the Exodus. I'm not a big expert on that. That's not my favorite topic of discussion, but there actually is evidence there. And in fact, a lot of people believe that Joseph, who was the Jew that led the Jews into Egypt prior to Moses, was in fact Imhotep. And there's actually a certain amount of evidence to support that. But all that being said, that's if you're talking about the free will as far as what the Pharaoh and Exodus, well, if you want to argue that, and that's why I don't generally argue with these things with atheists very much. It's more of something I would argue with someone who already believes that there is a divine power. Because if you start debating over the minutia of Scripture with an atheist, all the atheist has to say is, like, if this isn't the Bible, but this is just a book. The atheist has said, well, I don't care about anything that's in that book. What do you got? End of discussion. That's it. Because if you're going to talk about theological perspective of to that detail, not just the existence of God, but the actual theological details, you got to have a common point of reference. And for a Christian, that's the Bible. If you don't have a common point of reference to discuss, then the discussion is completely pointless. If everything I say is based on this book and you reject the premise of the book, we have nothing to talk about, except for, can we talk about whether or not the book is legit? That becomes the only conversation. However, if we start talking about, is this book legit? And the atheist says, well, I don't even believe God exists. Okay, so now you're back to really the only common ground, the only place that a theist and an atheist can have an honest intellectual discussion is, does God exist? That's really it. Because until you establish that God exists, then discussing whether or not the Bible is more accurate than the Quran is pointless. Until you discuss whether the Bible is more accurate than the Quran, then discussing individual theological points is pointless. You need to work towards your common ground. All right, and let's see. Captain MKG, there is no can. Okay. Is the glass half full or half empty? The glass is 2 times the size it needs to be. Did you say I think, therefore I am, or I stink, therefore I spam? Well, both are true. Ancient Egypt was highly bureaucratic. They rented to record all kinds of daily stuff. Absolutely zero mention of Hebrews ever, so Pharaoh's free will is okay to an atheist. Well, Luke, I don't think that just, first of all, let's assume for a moment that Exodus is 100% true and historical. So if that's true, and that God literally wiped out a huge swath of Egypt, including most of the military and the Pharaoh himself, is that something that you think the Egyptians would brag about? Because history, especially ancient history, tends to be written from a perspective of great victory. They generally don't write about their huge defeats. Gary says, live long and prosper. God bless. Thank you, Gary. And with that, I am going to wrap it up here. Whoa, and my computer just wigged out here. Wow, that was bizarre. Not enough memory to load this page. Wow. So all of a sudden, my, and those cameras froze again. Wow, this has just not been my day. Well, I can't even see the chat right now, but hopefully you guys can still see me. And I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for hanging out with me, and take care.
Let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, I love you. You son of a bitch, anti-tracker! You take that back! You take that back right now! He said that Frank Sinatra and Freddie Mercury were man-on-man lovers. It's not true, Mr. Miles. You're all liars. You're all liars, you sons of bitches.